Where's my, can I have my little that thing over, can you pass that over and the little piece of wood? Yep. Great. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Elizabeth Glidden. I'm the chair of this committee, and I'm joined today by council members Gordon, Cano, Reich, Bender, Fry, Councilmember Andrew Johnson, Quincy, Council President Johnson, Goodman, and Palmisano. And we are a quorum of the committee. We do not have any agenda items for today. We did have one item that will be postponed one more cycle, so I'll ask for a vote on that, and that is some follow-up reports relating to our municipal minimum wage. So all in favor of postponing those reports to the meeting of October 18th, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that item is postponed. So we'll turn next to reports of our committees. The first one listed is the budget subcommittee, but that is not an actual report, and I just encourage folks to continue to follow the process of reviewing the mayor's proposed budget, which occurs through our budget subcommittees. Next, we have community development and regulatory services with Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Community Development and Regulatory Services is bringing 16 items forward for approval tomorrow. Items number 1, 2, and 3 are land sales. Items 4, 5, 6, 7 are new business licenses. Item number 8 is changing to make similar the dates for appeal deadlines, moving the dates to both be 25 days. Item 9 is the regular liquor business and gambling licenses. Item 10 are business license operating conditions for the Pedal Pub. Item 11 is the permit to allow businesses to be open to 4 in the morning for service of alcohol around this time of the Super Bowl. Item 12 is the Central Lowry Avenue redevelopment site assembly cost sharing agreement with Hennepin County, and 13 is the modification to that redevelopment plan. Item 14 is acknowledging the LCDA awards for projects in our city. Item 15 is an appointment of someone to the Public Housing Board of Commissioners, Faith Young, seat 8, Ward 5. And item number 16 is the order to raise and remove a building at 3950 Sheridan Avenue North. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions on items 1 through 16.
All right, thank you. I'm not seeing any questions. Next, we have elections and rules. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We've got one item, which is to approve our elections judges for 2017.
Thank you very much. Next, we have health, environment, and community engagement with Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. There's only 2 items coming from the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee. The first is accepting a federal grant. It's over $300,000 to serve pregnant and parenting at-risk teens. And the second is 2 more appointees to the Southside Green Zone Task Force. Happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you very much. I'm not seeing questions. Next, we have the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. And I will just note that we moved through that committee approval of a federal agenda for 2017 and years forward. Next, we have public safety. I'm sorry, Council President Johnson.
And Madam Chair, I did communicate with IGR staff. I thought that it was important that we put in our agenda that we don't support removing state and local government taxes from deductibility and federal income tax. In the income tax reform, I communicated with staff yesterday. It's about 30, the best information I could get from IGR staff is that about 37%, I think it is, of Minnesotans use that deduction, and I assume that the number would be perhaps similar for the city of Minneapolis, but it would be a big deal for us because we're one of these high property tax, high income tax states that would be affected by a removal of that deduction from the ability to deduct it from a long form income tax filing.
So I don't And I apologize, I don't recall that I saw suggested language yet from staff, so we probably will have that at the full council meeting, and I will ensure that if there is a language suggestion, we forward that to all council members ahead of the council meeting, so you can review that and some background on the issue. And I'll just also note that we did also discuss in committee some, what I would call more minor, just a couple of language changes, so I might just note that too, and that would be in some of the background descriptions of the issue, so not changing other positions, but maybe just changing a little bit of language. So, but that would come forward for Friday, and we're looking for a version that we can send out ahead of them, so you can take a look. All right? Thank you for that, Council President. Next, we have Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management with the Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam
Oh, I'm
Vice
sorry.
President.
Yes, Vice Chair, Councilmember Gordon.
Yeah.
Somehow I thought it was Andrew Johnson for a second, and I
Well,
apologize.
That's all right. Councilmember Yang is unable to be here today, so I'm doing the report. We have 5 items that we'll be bringing forward from Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee. The first 4 were consent items without much discussion at all. One of them is authorizing an increase to a contract with Hennepin County Human Services. Another one's an increase to a contract with the Minnesota Crisis Intervention Team Officers Association. The third item is accepting a emergency management performance grant award for $30,000 to provide some funds to assist local governments in preparing for hazards. The fourth item is accepting a Urban Area Security Initiative Grant Award. That's for over $900,000, and that's to help us address risk-driven and capabilities-based planning, organization, equipment training, and exercise needs of high-threat, high-density urban areas, our city. And then the fifth item, we did have a fair bit of discussion about. This had to do with the Minneapolis Police Department mobile body-worn video camera equipment and the audit report. We received the audit report. We discussed it at some length, and there's 3 staff directions that came forward. One of the things we discussed is how the audit didn't have the police department's response to the findings, so we directed them to come back with a response at November 29th committee meeting. We also directed police department to report quarterly beginning next year regarding the operation of the cameras and their staff. And we also directed the auditor's office to work with the police department to address any outstanding issues that had been raised by the previous audits of the program, and to report back on progress by the end of February 2018. I can stand for questions on any of those.
All right, thank you. I'm not seeing questions. Next, we have Transportation and Public Works with Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee will be forwarding 10 items. Item 1 is the Special Service District proposed services and service charges for 2018. Item 2 is the gift acceptance for Florida International University for travel aid expenses for one of our engineers to give a presentation. Item 3 is the block event permit for the Zombie Pub Crawl. Item 4 is the Hiawatha Gap layout approval and easements. Item 5 is the, actually 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are all actions of the department to do its normal work. And I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Not seeing questions. Next, we have Ways and Means Committee with Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Ways and Means will bring forward 10 items for approval on Friday. The first 5 are various legal settlements. Another item is a waiver of conflict of interest for Gray Plant Moody. There are 4 contract amendments, including one at the Convention Center for the operation of the Events Business Management System, as well as the University of Minnesota for the 4-Walk system, with Apple Developer Enterprise Program, and a final contract amendment is with the University of Minnesota for the Creative City Challenge Temporary Public Art Commission. The final item is a gift acceptance for city staff to travel to Norway. It's a acceptance of a donation from the U.S. State Department related to outreach to immigrant communities. Happy to answer any questions on those 10 items.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Zoning and Planning Committee with Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 items. One is a rezoning on 301 and 311 East Lake Street. And item number 2 is a rezoning at 2550 Pillsbury Avenue South to add more residential units to an existing building.
So I have a question on this. So I see there is actually on the report that's in our book, this item number 3, which is the local historic designation for Homewood. Are we not actually voting on this, refer it back to staff, or I'm not understanding just the posture. And then I had a question whether there was a time frame given for when staff would come forward on this item. I will say I know there's sensitivity when this is not an item that's in my ward where I've kind of had more direct interaction, but I will say I've heard from residents about this issue. I've worked on kind of a similar project, although much smaller in my ward, and sometimes I feel a little challenged by the options that are presented to us as council members. Is it an all or nothing equation around 250 properties within a historic district, which just seems a little too black and white, especially for districts such as these, which are based on the social history as opposed to the architectural significance of these homes. So just wanting to get a little bit more information about the posture of this and what's next.
I'm happy to start, and the clerk maybe wants to chime in as well. The item was referred back to staff. There was a staff direction by Council President that the committee adopted. It did not have a timeline for a staff report back or any kind of indication of staff resources for this. The interim protections that the homes are currently under, there's 250 some homes, will expire in October. I guess later this week, or maybe it was last week. I think it was the 5th or 6th. And so that's the kind of overview. Because of a staff referral, I believe it doesn't come to council. So I can answer further questions, or Council President maybe wants to chime in.
Yes,
Madam Chair,
President.
as Councilmember Bender said, the interim protection expires, but if there was an application for a demo permit for any of the properties in the area, they would go through a historic review. So it isn't like we're blanket taking the authority to say yes or no to a demo permit request. It will have a historic review as part of just the routine process.
Yeah, and I guess I'll say I'm familiar with that process. Again, having had both, I've nominated several properties over the years and one district. So I kind of see how this process plays out. Again, I'll just say these are a lot of homes, 250 properties, and I believe the interim protection has been in place for over 1 year, which is a long period of time. I'll just say again, for a process that feels confusing to property owners, unless they are kind of into the weeds of how this works, this is a difficult thing to explain to a group of property owners. Especially when some seem a little bit more bought into wanting the historic designation than others who may not want that to happen to their home. Again, I just say this from experience working with other historic districts. These are difficult processes, and sometimes I feel like the longer we draw this out, we're not doing a benefit either to ourselves or our staff around just making a decision one way or another. Again, and I also feel like sometimes we get presented with a black and white, it has to be all or nothing, and I don't understand why that actually needs to be the case, especially in these type of designations where it's not for the architectural significance of every single property. Madam, and this is kind of weird, I'm talking, calling on people, so I apologize to everyone. Council President Johnson.
And Madam Chair, I couldn't agree with you more. It's the one thing that was really beneficial about this for everybody that lives in that district is they had a lovely history of how, who the architects were on their homes, what additions had been made, and so on and so forth. There's this valuable information for the people that are involved in the district. But, I have the same thing. I've got two neighborhoods that during a historic review of the north side were identified as having the best example of post-World War II housing in the city, story-and-a-half bungalows and ramblers that were built after World War II for veterans, or excuse me, people, coming home, the population explosion we had in the 50s. And, no way would I want to have some sort of a restriction on their ability to modify, to change, but there should be some way of recognizing that inventory, that stock, in a way that doesn't interfere with people's property rights. So I agree with you, and hopefully sending it back to staff can make us think more creatively about how we can do that kind of thing.
So, Madam Chair, boy, this is weird when I'm in the conversation, and so I apologize to folks. I just want to note for council members, and again, some people are super familiar with these processes. My guess is other council members just haven't had that personal experience yet. But there are other processes to designate these properties that do not, it's only the local designation that puts restrictions on what happens with how you modify the home or demolition or other kinds of things. So there's a state designation process and there is a federal designation process. Both of these are processes that do recognize the historic significance of the home. They're both detailed application processes that ensure kind of the same kind of rigor that goes into our processes around local designation. It is only the local designation process that provides actual protection to the home, whether it's the exterior or the interior. And then there's kind of a box around kind of the options of what you could do within that process, how restrictive, and there's only a certain amount. It's not like you can allow every single change that you want. You have to kind of meet some state guidelines, as I understand it, when you set the design guidelines for these properties. So again, there are other options, actually. They just don't exist at the kind of the local level, which again is, do we want some broader direction to our staff to help deal with historically significant properties where perhaps for one reason or another, putting restrictions on your ability to modify your home is maybe not the best option. So I'll just leave that out there for now. Are there other comments? Councilmember Bender?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually really appreciate you bringing this up. I have a lot of concerns about how we're doing the designation process, particularly for cultural districts that don't have the architectural significance as the driving factor. As you mentioned, for over a year and a half, 250 plus homeowners have had their homes under interim protection, which we had a petition with the vast majority of them who were opposed to the district, and they were stuck. Many of them came up to me after our meeting very confused about what this means, what the next steps are, which staff are going to work on it. Could it just come back at any time? Neighborhood organization has been organizing against it, along with a number of community organizations. To be honest, I would have supported simply, ending the process and not sort of leaving it hanging out there. I don't know that there was support for that decision now in the council. There certainly wasn't in the committee. So I think it's an important discussion going forward, though, like what's the process that we use to nominate districts? This was nominated by one HPC commissioner, and then the interim protections came immediately under effect. Perhaps we want to elevate those decisions to the council. I think there could be other policy considerations to make sure that property owners in our community that may be low income or have financial challenges aren't burdened with interim protections in an indefinite time period when we don't have the staff resources to really sensitively approach cultural designations in a way that's really truly engaging the community. I think unfortunately there was also a lot of unfortunate back and forth about the shared history of this community and sort of which cultures were being elevated and not in the designation materials. And so anyway, there's a lot more to discuss about this, and I appreciate again that you brought it up, and I think there's a lot more work to do going forward.
Other conversation?
Sure.
Council Member Fry.
In this sort of interim period, since it's been sent back to staff, does that pose any difficulty on individuals that are trying to sell if it's in a no man's land? I mean, I guess that's just, I'm not asking that to anybody specific. That's the only concern I would have.
I don't know if Councilmember Bender has a response to that. I'll just say to you that that might depend on your question to different realtors. So, because again, that's the difference between, what is the actual process and then kind of what's a little bit of the communication that happens through trying to sell your property.
Okay.
Other comments? Not seen any. So with that, I believe that we have concluded with our agenda for today, and we are adjourned. Thank you.